Um, well, hello, everyone, wherever you are in the world. I'm Matthew Bishop, and I'm here in New York. Looking forward to this fireside conversation with Vic van Vuuren and Sue Riddleston, and welcome wherever you are. I could ask you, firstly, if you would mute your mics at this point. And I should also just let everyone know that two things. One, we're going to be recording this session. And secondly, we will have plenty of opportunity for Q&A, which we'd invite you to put any questions you have and comments into the chat section, and I'll be monitoring that and bringing that to the attention of the speakers. So our focus is unusually, institutional in the sense that Vic is with the ILO and leads the task force that they have on the social and solidarity economy. And we're looking at proposing resolutions that will get the social entrepreneurial voice better represented at the table in international discussions, particularly as we look to build back much more effectively from COVID. Vic and I are going to kick off with a bit of a conversation about the task force that he leads, his vision, and the task force vision of the social and solidarity economy, and what needs to be done to give it a greater role, and particularly how the social entrepreneurial voice that Catalyst 2030 has been created to give greater expression to it. How that voice can be better heard, and the great resources that social entrepreneurs bring to the table can really be used to its greatest potential. And then Sue is going to chime in with some comments and thoughts and some reports from some of our own deliberations internally within Catalyst 2030 about the role that potentially social entrepreneurs and Catalyst 2030 in particular can play in shaping the international response to COVID-19, but also driving the broader systemic changes that are going to be needed if we're going to get back on track to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Sue runs an organization, Bioregional, which by some strange coincidence is located in the town where I grew up, and within the ward, the council ward, where I was actually the councillor more than 20 years ago. I think when they started building their very pioneering environmentally friendly housing in that area, and so it's great to see you again, Sue. But first I'm going to start with Vic. Vic, if you would just, you've been with the ILO a long time, you've been involved with leading this task force. I'm intrigued, firstly, just to get a sense of what this task force is, what the mission is, and what you at the ILO are hoping to do in terms of reframing the conversation around the role of the social economy, solidarity economy, and the role that social entrepreneurs can put into that.
Thank you. Thank you for the time. I think to start off with, the UNTFSSE stands for the United Nations Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy. It's been around for a while, but it was a rather small group, but it's grown quite large now. We are 18 UN agencies across the UN. I happen to be in the International Labour Organization and have been appointed as chair of this group, but that is as far as the ILO goes. We provide input into this larger group of UN agencies. So you have the FAO, you have the UNDP, and so I can rattle off all the acronyms of these agencies. And we formed a task force, but invited observers to join us. And so we have about 20 observers at the moment. Eurixare, we've got REPES, we've got a number of the NGOs that operate in the field of either the social and solidarity economy or in social entrepreneurship. And these groups have joined as observers, but play a very active role in our debates and in the structuring of the work that we're going to do, or that we are doing. Our focus at the moment is that we've realized that the social and solidarity economy and all the relevant players in social entrepreneurship and the like, cooperatives, are not making as much headway as we could do in terms of reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. We think that there is a huge amount of potential that has been untapped, and we now need to see what are those global factors that are preventing this growth of the social economy and social entrepreneurs. And so we've decided to take it on a piecemeal basis. You know, in Africa, where I come from, we've got an idiom that says, how do you eat an elephant? It's piece by piece. And we realize that we can't just rush in overnight and find that we've got a solution to all these challenges, and that the social and solidarity economy is now going to be at the tip of everyone's tongue. So we first of all realize at the global level, we need to have a platform to work off. And part of this platform creation will be by getting a resolution on the social and solidarity economy that's very powerful. And so we're working very closely. Now, the UN itself cannot propose to have a UN resolution. It has to come from governments that are members of the United Nations. And so we've been working with a number of governments who are interested in asking for a resolution, and we've been giving the technical input into what could make the substance or the content of such a resolution. And we're working very closely with the French government, with Sarah, who may even be online from the office of Christophe Itier, and their Pact for Pact initiative, which we support and which goes parallel to what we're doing. And we're hoping that in July, as in next month, that we'll have a government that will table a possible resolution for consideration at this year's General Assembly of the UN. If we happen to miss this year, then we definitely want to try and get it done next year. But we found one government in particular that's keen to drive the process, and that is Spain. And so Spain, will be supported by the French government, by Costa Rica. There's a whole host of governments that will provide a supporting role. In order to get a resolution through, we need countries from each of the 5 regions to support this. And so the process that we've undertaken is not only looking at substance, but is now to get support from these many countries to try and back the Spain who will table this. So we have our office in New York through UNDESA, who are now going to start briefing the Spanish government on the actual process to get this done. So that's the first angle that we're taking, which is a very serious one. We have received input from yourselves, as in yesterday, and we will build that into the process. I have to take it back to the task force to see how we can do this, but either way, we need to find a mechanism that we can make sure that your inputs are also included in this debate at the UN General Assembly. The second part that we've tackled is to look at a knowledge platform. We find that there isn't a global platform that is providing people with an access to literature, to best case scenarios, best practice that they can access. And so what we've done is created a knowledge platform funded by South Korea and the government of Luxembourg. And we're now going to get this to be much bigger and to start branding it in terms of making the literature available. The next step that we're undertaking is one of an operational project. What I found is coming from a developing economy, I find that the willingness is there, but there is very little by way of a regulatory framework that promotes entrepreneurship, never mind in general, never mind social entrepreneurship. And so we need to create a regulatory framework and a advisory framework that will assist people in countries to start moving into the realms of the social entrepreneurship and social enterprises. And to that end, we've worked with Jürgen Schweckmann, who's an ex-ILO official who specializes in this area, and we've put together a proposal which I've shared with Jeru, which we're now going to be discussing with possible donors to start with pilot projects of how to set up regulatory frameworks for social entrepreneurship and the social economy in the developing economies. And on Friday this week, I'll be meeting with the Deputy Commissioner on the Social and Solidarity Economy from the EU to talk about a road ahead. I'll just touch very briefly on the other angles, and we can explore them later if they are of more interest. The education angle is one that we want to pick up on. We're producing students out there in the world who know nothing about social economy. Our education systems have very few of them. There are some, but very few of them have any content where they teach people about, or students about, the social economy and social entrepreneurship. So we're going to be focusing on different angles of how to deal with the education gap. The next one is local economic development. We want to look at the angle of local economic development because we don't only want to drive it from top down, but from bottom up. And there we've got a team a sub-team of our group that will be looking at how can we tackle the local economic development challenges regarding this topic. I think that sums up a lot of the work that we're doing, because we're trying to keep focused and just target 4 or 5 areas. And as we unravel that, we will look to tackling some more areas as we go forward. We're looking for partnerships and networks, and this is why it was interesting that we've come across Catalyst 2030, or you've come across us, vice versa. And we certainly would like to work with different groups. We're not stuck to our own hymn sheet, but want to explore the creativity that the likes of yourselves bring to the table, that we can factor into the work that we do, and at the same time assist what you guys are doing. Thank you. I'll stop there, because otherwise I can go on too long.
Thanks, Vic. Very, very helpful introduction. I want to ask one question about substance and one about, I guess, the whole process side of things, and before we bring Sue in. But on the substance, I mean, taking a very high level perspective, you've been around the UN a long time. What is it that wasn't there in the UN worldview that you're trying to put right now through this task force?
There's a couple of areas in the UN system that I think over the years, not by design, but by default, have not received the required attention. And the one is gender. The other one is the social economy. And what we find is you will find mention of the social and solidarity economy in the SDGs. You will find mention of it in certain parts of or certain agencies, but it's certainly not in the mainstream of thinking or activity. And we need to elevate that. And that's why we believe that although it's mentioned, it needs a much higher profile that we can then use as a lever to take back into countries and to mainstream it in thinking. We don't want this as an aside. It has to be part of the national development plans and strategies of countries. And at the moment, if you go back to countries, you hardly find it. It's not in the mainstream of thinking. And although one doesn't at the moment think that it's going to replace existing models, it certainly can play a much bigger role in addressing the social deficit and the environmental challenge. And it's perfectly geared to do that. So we need to have a stronger platform within the UN to work back into the countries.
Great. And when it comes to sort of I suppose the tactical institutional questions, I guess, maybe I'm unfairly characterizing social entrepreneurs, but I think traditionally they've been, often quite skeptical about governments and multilateral institutions and their ability to change anything. And so when we talk about getting a resolution done, I'm intrigued to just get a sense from you as an insider, what difference does something like a resolution at the UN make in terms of practical outcomes, as you say, down at the more granular level of the country or the person working on the front line in a local community?
It certainly raises the profile of the topic, and that's what we need to do, is to raise the profile. And within the UN, it gives us a mandate to come in far stronger in the debate in countries. And if this resolution is accepted, we're certainly going to make use of that in our approach to governments across all the developing economies. Because not only do we want to just brand the social and solidarity economy, we believe that it can make a huge difference, far bigger than what it is doing at the moment. And it's that potential that we're going to reach. So first of all, we have to have leadership. We have to have people who are committed to driving this. And then we have to convince governments that this is an important path to follow. Now, the Canadian government and many of the developed economies have shown the path of what this can do. But if I go back into the continent of Africa, it's a difficult sell. And the more that we can have a profile at a global level and show best practice scenarios, the easier it will be to get this onto the agenda, and also to make sure that it is a debate that is heard, that is the regulatory framework is created, and that we then can cultivate social entrepreneurs, because that's the mandate we're looking for. Nick Stern summed it up the other day when he said profitability for people and planet. I mean, people and planet has got to be the focus now, and that's what social entrepreneurs are focusing on.
So just one more quick follow-up. I mean, why, you mentioned that it's a hard sell in some places. Why is the social solidarity economy, why is social entrepreneurs a hard sell in that sort of those international tables?
Because the people who are in decision-making areas don't know what the social economy is. many of the people we engage with have heard about the social economy, but don't understand the dynamics. And as I said, it comes back to the education system. We're educating people without informing them of what social and solidarity economy can do and what it's about. And so, and I would venture to say that in many countries, it's the one who brings in the investment who determines what happens. If you're in a developing economy, you're not always in an easy decision-making role where you are reliant on outside investment. And if that investment determines you and tells you to go a different path, then you go a different path because you need that investment. And so our engagement at the moment is also with the impact investors. It's not just covering one angle. We've got to start looking at impact investment and how this investment drives the agenda in the developing economies. And if we link that investment angle as well, we certainly would have more support also from an investment point of view, encouraging governments to engage in this debate. And that is an angle that we're going to explore as well.
Great. Well, I want to bring in Sue, who has been leading a lot of the Catalyst 2030 thinking about this resolution and where we might sit within, what tables we might sit at within the UN system and elsewhere. Sue, do you want to maybe sort of talk about the process that you and the team have been going through and where you've so far got in terms of requests and ideas?
Okay, thank you, Matthew, and thanks, Vic, for that great introduction. we actually established Catalyst 2030 because we're so concerned that the Sustainable Development Goals won't be achieved till 2094 at this rate. And we want to try and achieve them by 2030. We want to accelerate progress and achieve some system change. And so that's kind of at the core of what we're doing. And at the very heart, right from the beginning, has been this idea that we need the people responsible for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals are governments. And we need to somehow infiltrate the system with what we do and get this high level recognition that Vic talked about. And I can speak from personal experience when attending the UN, worked with the UN to achieve the goals and then in specific some of the targets in the goals, that the governments have no idea what a social entrepreneur or the social and solidarity economy is. I think one of the problems is that there are 9 major groups. This is how the government has organised it. The UN has organised it, and there's NGOs or business or farmers or women or youth and so on. But we don't fit in the system at the moment, and I think it's completely right that we need this platform, and this resolution is really important. So what we have done is we have looked at the resolution and discussed in a session which we had yesterday actually, and also in our working group on governance in the UN, and collected some feedback which we have provided to Vic already, but we're still collecting that feedback, so you might get a bit more, Vic. And I think a key thing that we really want is some sort of some focal point person or special rapporteur for social entrepreneurship at the UN level, someone in the UN who's really advocating for this, perhaps backed by this resolution. And then we also need leadership at a ministerial level within nations, so that there's someone who is responsible, much as Sarah from the Prince Robins from the French government is responsible for this area in France, and she's within Catalyst 2030 and working together with us on this. So that's the sort of first thing, that that the resolution is adopted to give this recognition and this platform, and that there is some person responsible at the UN and at a national ministerial level, and even at a state level was discussed yesterday. I think the attitude, one thing that came out really strongly was the attitude of the social entrepreneurs to this. Those of us that have experience working within the UN system and with governments, it's no good us rocking up and saying, we've got all the answers, we've got the solutions, why don't you just scale our solutions? That's what's needed, don't you know? We have to know what the government wants. So we have to very clearly see government plans and work to what they need and go in a spirit of co-creation, turn up as experts who are helpful. And I think that is the spirit that was discussed in our group yesterday, that we know works. And as I say, I was speaking on the experience of being involved in the Sustainable Development Goals. You had to let go of your organisational issue, and you can still hold on to your topic, your area of expertise, but kind of subsume yourself in the big effort to achieve, first of all, to get the goals, and now the big effort is to achieve the goals. So I think in terms of the spirit of it, Vic, we'd like it to really reflect that sort of servant service co-creation approach that social entrepreneurs have found is successful, but in return we kind of need government to give us a steer and tell us what they want, have clear plans. So that is a third point, that there are national plans which include what social entrepreneurs could bring, which are transparent with relevant metrics. And often social entrepreneurs don't fall inside. If you look at international development funding, for example, most of the funding goes to big NGOs who are delivering huge programs, whereas a lot of the social entrepreneurs could be working with and supporting governments to set up these infrastructures themselves. So there's something of a change in the multilateral institutional systems and government attitudes in terms of including social entrepreneurs, or that sort of approach, in terms of delivering the green recovery that we all want to see post-COVID. So that would be, and so often there are initiatives and incentives and social entrepreneurs are not included. So I think this platform could set the stage for that. As Vic said, we thought it was very important to show the practical case studies, and that was something we planned to do ourselves. So I think we'd very much like to team up with you, Vic, on your new platform, your knowledge platform, funded by South Korea and Luxembourg. Excellent job. Sometimes in some countries, a fifth point is that sometimes in some countries, there is a need to change legal structures to enable social entrepreneurs to form a legal entity and actually work effectively. So that would be a fifth ask. We have had very specific feedback around on the resolution, including women, young entrepreneurs, and recognising a whole paragraph to sort of elevate that there are a lot of practical examples, and perhaps you could refer to your knowledge platform, Vic. Odin maybe is best placed to speak specifically about his point to create a team that accelerates the institutionalisation of social innovations via UN bodies. He's made a very specific piece of feedback there, and there may be others in the group attending who would like to sort of elaborate on their point. But I think those are the 5 key points. I'll just recap. A focal point of the UN, national and state level focal points who are responsible at a ministerial or a secretary general level, secondly. National plans with metrics and that are transparent, that include social entrepreneurs. Bringing social entrepreneurs into more of the way we do business in terms of multilateral agencies, government incentive programs, and fifthly, these changes to legal infrastructure that are needed to enable social entrepreneurs to operate legally as entities. So there is and we really want to work with you, Vic, in that spirit of collaboration, and so we're so delighted to see that you are doing this, because we recognise that for system change, it's not just our organisation, it's not even just us as social entrepreneurs. We need massive collaboration to make this happen. So during the summer, we're going to work on the best practice case studies and partnerships with McKinsey, and in partnership with Lex Mundi Network, the legal pro bono network, we're going to review country level legal structures and suggest a best practice framework. So that's kind of the journey we've been on and the feedback we've got up to now, with more feedback coming in daily. And we're hoping to include this in the report that you're working on with us, Matthew, to present to the United Nations at the French government side event on the social and solidarity economy on the 15th of July.
Thank you, Sue. That was terrific. One follow-up question. I mean, I was interested in terms of your own personal experience working with the UN and what you commented more broadly in terms of the approach that has to be taken. I mean, do you feel now that this mindset change has occurred amongst social entrepreneurs, that there is a sense of understanding of why engaging with organizations like the UN in a co-creative and collaborative way makes, is essential at this point?
You'll never convince all social entrepreneurs, because social entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs, and sometimes they're a bit like, I don't know, who's a famous entrepreneur? Alan Sugar,
Steve Jobs or something.
Yeah, they kind of, or Elon Musk,
Yes.
They can be a bit quirky. We can be a bit quirky, but I think generally everybody's just extremely concerned about the need to accelerate progress and even not go backwards, especially during COVID. So I think it's that spirit that's also come out through COVID, that we are all in this together. We're going to have to collaborate together, and this thinking that's going on in people's minds as they think, well, how are we going to accelerate change? So I think Catalyst 2030 has been a great vehicle to discuss that, and thanks to Giroux for convening all of us to have that conversation together. So you'll never bring everyone along, but there's enough who already do work with governments or who want to work with governments, and plenty of expertise out there to really get stuck in on this, I think. So
I'm going to go back to Vic now, but as I do so, I just want to remind everyone who's joined us today that do put questions in the Zoom group chat, because we'll turn to those in a very short moment. So Vic, firstly, I'd just like to hear your response to Sue's set of proposals, both, I think, in terms of the vision that's behind those proposals, but also in terms of the practicality, given your knowledge of how the process works at the UN.
Thank you. Working in the last few years, I come from the private sector before joining the ILO, and worked in a large financial services organization, and realized when I joined the ILO that I certainly also wasn't understanding the value of the social and solidarity economy. It was foreign to me, and that's where I first started engaging in the debate. And what I found in getting involved in this is like joining a church. The people that support the social and solidarity economy are extremely passionate about the topic, but we forget that we've got to go outside the church to find new church members who believe in the same thing. And it doesn't just, we get each other fired up in the social and solidarity arena, but we've got to get other people fired up. And that's the challenge of getting to the governments that count to get the scaling up. What we've got to really focus on is the strategic interventions that will allow for a massive scaling up of these activities. And so the points that have been raised by Sue, the focal points, we fully support that. But what we need to be mindful of is, if we're going to go to the UN, anything that's going to cost additional budgets at the moment is going to meet with resistance. So we've got to be careful about what we put on the table and how we put it on the table, because the moment a government sees that this is going to cost an X million extra dollars to create what we want through this resolution, then we're going to meet with huge resistance. So how we structure and table to achieve these ends is going to be extremely important. But in principle, the focal points, both at the UN level and at the national level, will go a long way in meeting the first steps of getting this entrenched into national plans. And I think that's what our objective is. Now, what we need to do in order to get it entrenched in national plans is to show how this can be done. And that's why we want to, at the same time as dealing with the strategy and the resolution, is to have this operational program that we start doing 1 or 2 pilot countries where we can come up with a holistic plan on how you can put your regulatory framework in place, what it means to have a regulatory framework, where in the government can you put aside budget that will deal with supporting social entrepreneurs. Because at the moment, the financing component is missing. And as much as you convince a government that it's a good thing, when they look at the end of the year budgets, it's not on the budget at all. And so you've got to start grappling around to find bits and pieces to support the initiatives. So the changes in the legal infrastructure, the last point that was raised, that's fully on our agenda in terms of amending and supporting a regulatory framework that will support the social entrepreneurs. There was a question on the chat there about how does one become an observer of the UN task force. There's no prohibition for anyone applying to join. It must be an NGO that is supporting the social and solidarity economy mandate. It must be an organization with a reasonable amount of substance, not just one or two individuals. They then apply to become an observer and they come on and join the meetings. All they don't have is voting power, but they have the right to speak. They have a right to put their views on the table. But at the end of the day, it's the 18 UN agencies who do the actual final decision making. But we have one instance where I found that the UN task force is at odds with its observer group. We all talk the same language, and I've run it for the last 4 years now. I've been involved in the last 4 years, and it's been one happy family. The areas that we need to explore are the areas of social innovation, which Sue mentioned. And I don't know that we've really got enough at a debate going around social innovation at the moment. And I think that's something that we need to scale up. Within the ILO, I've created in the area that I'm responsible for what we call an enterprise innovation facility. And we've now started our own exercise in the ILO of looking at creative ways of how we can address our mandate and using the footprint that we've got. The one thing we need to recognize in the UN is that we've got a huge global footprint. And so within the ILO, I've got a team across all the regions of enterprise specialists who can support the work that we do. And that makes a much easier task when we start wanting to take this globally. The last point on best practices, we'd welcome to talk about how we can capture the best practices that you talk about and have them put onto our knowledge platform. That can be a separate exercise we take up, but it's an easy low-hanging fruit area that I see that we can join forces on. Let me stop there, otherwise I'll go on too long.
So thanks very much, Vic. So one question, picking up on your point about social innovation, I think social entrepreneurs would be particularly associated with that idea of social innovation in a way that maybe some other parts of the social sector, are less focused on innovation, more on delivery of service and already, or some aspects of aid and development and so forth that are more familiar topics within the UN system. Is there anything we can learn as a group of social entrepreneurs trying to enter into this system from other parts of the social and solidarity sector that are already better plugged in to UN work? You're on mute at the moment.
What I find is that the observer groups are bringing invaluable input into the UN discussion. I think in the UN, we were very stereotypical in how we approached the social economy. It was a nice to have on the side. We gave it a little bit of space. But I think now with the SDGs, we've been able to elevate that debate within the UN system. But the value that's been brought is organizations like yourself, Catalyst 2030, REPES, GCEF, a whole range of these bodies who've had different experiences and successes that are now coming forward, and we're learning from that, and we can combine our efforts. I think what is important, and I see there's a question on access to capital, is we've got to engage the financial markets about the role of the social entrepreneur, about the role of the social economy, because the mindset of the funders out there, be it in national or international, is that we're talking about entrepreneurs of necessity. It's people who have got nothing else but a survival mode of thinking, and therefore we're not really going to invest in this area of necessity. But we've got entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs of opportunity. And if we can get them to understand that there's huge opportunity out there by investing into the social and solidarity economy and social entrepreneurship, there's a lot of benefit for all. And so we've got to now start moving the debate into the funding areas. That's why we had last week discussions with GSG, which is I forget the acronym, but it's with the impact investors. Yeah. And to talk to those investors to make sure that when they go to governments, they put the social and solidarity economy on the agenda. I think let me stop there. again.
Yes, I wanted to call on Odin Muhlenbein, who Sue referenced earlier, who I think, and has also commented in the chat section, to you have a very specific point you want to make, Odin, and you're on mute at the moment. Good.
Hello, thanks, Sue and Matthew. This is Odin from Ashoka, a global network of social entrepreneurs. Vic, you mentioned money and the need to focus more on social innovation. I think one of the proposals we have is actually a good combination of that, in that the UN bodies can actually accelerate social innovations or help them institutionalize without spending any money. Yes, we would like to have more money, but the other thing we need is better access to the convening power, the standard setting power of these bodies. And we have seen a number of social entrepreneurs who have actually successfully changed UN policies at the WHO, at the UNHCR, etc. But it always took ages. Like several years were always spent before the right people understood what these people are, why they are relevant, why they should listen to them. And this is what we could accelerate a lot. For example, by just having a very small team at each UN agency, it could just be 2 people really, that scan the world for relevant social proven innovations and just help these innovations get through the UN processes. So that it doesn't take the 11 years that it took to recognize psychosocial therapy at the WHO, or to approve a new medical standard for trauma care in Brazil, and all these things that social entrepreneurs are developing. Like if we save 3 to 5 years in each of those cases, then that would save, that would unlock millions and millions of dollars in net profits for societies. And these are just the simple things that I think both governments and the UN could do, that is basically free.
Great, Vic, back to you.
I like your thinking, and I think there's a certain way we've got to approach this. What we must remember is that the UN system is full of bureaucrats and not entrepreneurs. And so there's a very cumbersome process to follow, and it can be very frustrating working in these systems and the time it takes to go from A to B. But what we've got here is perhaps an opportunity with the UN task force, which captures a lot of these agencies on one platform. And if we start engaging with you and you point in the direction that it's needed, then I certainly, in the time that I'm the chair and involved in this, we can fast track these initiatives, and we'll certainly go a long way in doing that, because we've learned the system internally. You help us with the ideas. What we need are those best practice or those creative solutions that we can put on the table. And if you point that out, we can form a partnership in how we drive this through the system much quicker. And I think that would be the ideal situation, because within the system at the moment, we don't have enough thinkers in the realms of what you're talking about. And so we're going to have to rely on the outside thinkers and the entrepreneurs to use the conduit that we can provide to fast track this into reality. So it's a discussion we can sit down and brainstorm on the technicalities of it. But in principle, I certainly support your thinking and would look to see how we can fast track these ideas.
So one specific practical question is, can Catalyst be an observer with the task force?
I certainly don't see why not. If it was up to me, it would be a straightforward yes. But it would be just for the Catalyst 2030 to send us, the mission, the vision, whatever you've got in terms of what makes you stick together, who the members are, and then we put it to the group. And my experience is that it shouldn't be a problem at all. And then become invited to the meetings every 6 weeks. You get part of you feed into the system. You don't just have to be there to listen. You're part of the debate.
Great. Well, I think Giroux will be giving you a big round of applause for that encouraging result. That we can say we're on our way. Great. Sue, back to you. Any more responses from what you've heard?
Yeah, I just wanted to also clarify this observer point. So at Bioregional, it took us 5 years to get UN observer organisation status from UNDESA. Is it that process? Because some of us may already be accredited as observer organisations and can therefore sponsor Catalyst 2030 members under our umbrella, or is it not as formal as that?
Not as formal as that. It's a matter of 2-3 weeks and we should have it done. It's a matter of a request from your side. I take it, I send a mail to all of the existing members saying, here's someone who'd like to be a member. This is the credentials of Catalyst 2030. If I don't get any objection within the following 5 days, you then become a member and you're invited.
Perfect, thank you.
Formal at all.
Great. Sue, any other reflections on what Vic has said in response to your proposals?
Yes, I think it's right. It's about a culture change within the UN. One thing that we found worked really well during the SDGs process, we were trying to explain sustainable consumption and production. We just had breakfast briefings. These days with social, and you know, these diplomats and officials, they have so many issues that they need to tackle. So I think if we can just almost get do a bit of a road show around the different organisations, just explaining the value that we can bring. And as I strongly support what Odin said, and if Odin hadn't said it, I wanted to say it. It's not a question of spending more money. It's about spending the same money, but with a slightly different approach. Or maybe in terms of responsibilities, you said, Vic, you said governments won't want to spend more money. And in terms of the national focal points, it could be that it's repurposing existing positions or adding it to someone's job description. So I agree. I don't think it's about spending more money. It's just about changing mindsets. So we'll definitely follow up to talk to you more about that.
Vic?
I can respond to that. Yes, I think that's why I say we need to be careful how we table it, because you've got people who just to get this on the agenda, you've got to work through the Spanish department that's responsible for social and solidarity economy. They're totally on board, but they have to work through their Department of Foreign Affairs. And the minute the Department of Foreign Affairs gets hold of this, they don't understand the dynamics behind it, and suddenly they ask a lot of questions. And the minute there's any costs involved, they start backing off. So what we do is we ensure there's a certain clause or part of the application that goes in for the placing it on the agenda is to state there will be zero costs. The minute you do that, there's a sigh of relief and people will start paying attention. And so what we need to make sure is that if we talk about focal points, they don't see an additional budget that's required to put expensive people into place. It's a matter of giving existing resources the responsibility to deal with this. Over time, we might find that it will migrate to a permanent position of some sort. But we just need to make sure we get that creep slowly to entrench what we want to get on the table.
So, and Vic, I mean, besides what you've just described, the sort of inevitable bureaucratic sort of defensive mechanisms against change that exist, do you envisage any other serious opposition to the resolution, or is it more about, you know, inertia than opposition?
There's one risk that we always carry, and that is that your G7 group, although France is part of that, we do have support from that, but some of your big countries out there who may not support it, and people might not like it, like to oppose them. We do run that risk, and I'm not quite sure how they will approach the matter, whether they see it as important. The second challenge that we have is COVID itself. When we approached the one government, they said we will certainly support it and table it, but not this year. We need to do it next year when COVID is a little bit behind us. But we've eventually got the Spanish government who said, no, we're prepared to take it up this year. So COVID and some of the big guns out there in terms of the big economies, if they don't have an appetite for it, you might find the others who rely on investment from them just backing off a little and not being so excited. But for the moment, we've got a critical mass that we think would be able to drive it through. Great.
There's a request from Moradrik Chibi to jump into the conversation. So if you have a brief remark, Moradrik.
Sorry, is it you want to come in?
Well, I think he's about to. Moradrik's about to speak, and we can't actually see you or hear you at this point. Okay, I think maybe there's some technical issue there. So before we'll mute Moradrik, and then we'll go to David Parejo's question, which is really about a joint proposal to overcome red tape still in most of the countries. Could Catalyst 2030 become a certified body for all social impact initiatives to support collective impact? What do you think about that idea, Vic?
I like it, but what we've got to do is, at the moment, all the best practices that we're taking forward, or most of them, come from the developed economy. And when you're talking of the developing economy, it's a different ballgame altogether. And we've got to get some, not small, but we need to get some substantive best practice scenarios from some of the developing economies involving the regulatory framework. And once we do that, we can, and this, what David's proposing will fall into that category. Then we certainly can take it and scale it up much faster. But at the moment, we've got pockets of excellence that we are battling to scale up. And therefore, we've got to deal with the fundamental problems, and that is the regulatory framework, a government policy, and on the mainstream agenda of the government's national development plans. Then we're starting to get serious. Until we get that sorted out, we're going to continue to deal with pockets of excellence without the ability of scaling up.
One other, I mean, I suppose with COVID, there's two particular areas with the developing countries that, you know, I guess a lot of social entrepreneurs in our group have experience with. One being last mile healthcare delivery, and another being work with livelihoods in, you know, subsistence and small farmers and so forth. Are you? I mean, how developed are your proposals around those two areas in particular? And is that an area where you'd look to us to provide good case studies?
Well, we've got some case studies, but we're not well prepared in those areas. We've got, in the ILO, we can pull out examples of both healthcare and the agri sector. But once again, we're talking of not very substantive examples, but areas of success. And the more we can put together, the better it would be in putting a case forward. You know, many people, there's another debate that I want to mention, which I'm involved in, and that is we need to be creative in involving partners outside of just social entrepreneurship. The private sector is a key element out there, and we need to start seeing what role can the private sector play, and not all of them are against or in principle against the social entrepreneur or social economy. And there's a research paper that was done by the European Commission to explore linkages between the social economy and what we see as the traditional private sector. And there's also this body called Capitals Coalition. I was involved in the Social Capitals Coalition, which is now merged with the Natural Capital Coalition, dealing with the environmental and the social side. And in Davos this year, they launched this new Capitals Coalition, which is going to be based in the Netherlands. Those are areas that I want to explore and see what are the synergies in what they do, and what can they support in the areas that we would like to advance. So, sorry, I've deviated from your initial question of the health and the agri sector, but we've got to explore all different areas, and including the work that's done in different sectors. And I want to keep an open mind as we go forward. I'm finding it difficult sometimes in the debate within the social economy groupings, and they think my thinking is going too broad. It's not at the expense, but rather to advance the social and solidarity economy that we need to bear this in mind.
Great. Well, that's very helpful. I'm going to bring in Mordrek, who's back, and just ask if you make a very brief remark, Mordrek, and then I'm going to ask Vic and Sue for some closing thoughts, and particularly, you know, the challenge that you would throw out to members of Catalyst 2030 as to what we can do to help accelerate this whole process. Mordrek.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I'm sure you can hear me.
We can.
Yes. My name is Mordrek. I'm the Regional Innovation Advisor for WHO. Yes, I've been listening through this interesting conversation, and I'm very much excited, especially giving much visibility to our social entrepreneur. And from the African context, it's an agenda that we are also pushing, but very much from a health innovation point of view. And we are trying to encourage countries to put in place mechanisms that can facilitate that either development and scaling of innovations in the region. So having said this context, and what we have been realizing for the few years that we've been working in this space is looking at the supply and demand nexus. We are realizing that, like what Vic alluded to, is especially in our context, governments, in as much as we can say they lack some kind of understanding on the dynamics related to this space. But what we are also feeling is there is always that prioritization to serve for that goes into short term versus long term. And this obviously speaks to the system. How can you actually strengthen the system that will facilitate that the supply of those innovations to meet the demand that that obviously is appropriate for applying or implementation of some of those innovations. So I have two suggestions to this. One is we need to find a way of making a case. Like in our perspective, we say, what is the public health value? How can you articulate the public health value for scaling of some of those innovations? How can you make governments accountable? How can you make governments the creator of
Mordred, I've got to ask you to be as quick as you can in your comments because we're almost out of time.
Thank you so much. So one issue is to make government create demand for those innovations that are coming out of the pipeline for social entrepreneurs. Otherwise, if it's just from the push mechanism without necessarily, relating to how this is going to be uptaken or adopted or scaled from the market side, it is no point. The second thing also is what we have seen in Africa is there is a lot of disconnect across sectors. It all depends on the definition of success. For instance, social entrepreneurs normally lies with small and medium enterprise ministry. And when it comes to the demand of some of those innovations, it can either be in agriculture, it can either be in health and all that, but there's always that disconnect in terms of what is expected from the market ministries and also from the supply ministry. So this is something that we need to pitch, but most important is let's look at the demand side, because otherwise if we just push for social entrepreneurship without necessarily looking at the demand side, we'll run into the problem of not buying in. Thank you so much. These are few.
Thank you so much, Mordred. And I think you'll find both those points, both the demand side and the silo busting, cross government approach are going to be two themes that are very strong in the report that we made to the UN. I want to quickly turn as we wrap up to Vic, if you have any particular final thoughts, and to Sue, Giroux, I think we feel like there are at least three areas of potential collaboration that have come out of this conversation. One is obviously the point about observer status on the task force. There's a second around your whole knowledge generation, knowledge platform, both the specific platform, but also more generally sharing within the UN system around all the social innovations that we see every day in every part of the world, and how we can share those better with you. And then generally improving the linkages between social entrepreneurs and Catalyst 2030 with all aspects of the UN, as well as certainly all those that are involved in the task force. But Vic, any final thoughts?
Yes, I'm not going to go into the substance, but to say that if one goes ahead, and I certainly see a lot of scope for us working together, it's all about leadership, energy, and having a thick skin. It's a lot of stumbling blocks in the way. We just got to get through them and around them when we talk about promoting the common agenda that we have here. And so for me, if we've got the right leadership, which we're trying to get in the UN side from the energy around this topic, together with the observers who I find have got the passion, then we certainly would like to work with you and have a partnership on these areas that we've identified.
Great. Sue?
We definitely team up with you on this, Vic. You've got our commitment. Got a couple of practical suggestions. One is that I think that Mordred made a great point about the value, showing the value. And if we could maybe have some webinar series from now to the UN General Assembly with a sort of, the main intention is which we're helping you and showcasing the report that we're working on and the resolution. I'm sure we can arrange that, and with friendly governments we all know. And then I guess I've got a question for you, which is very practical in terms of, do you want us to ask governments to support it? When do we have a sort of, when is the cut-off date for a sort of final version of the text? Can the governments themselves make any change to the text? I know it's a bit iterative, but just...
Once, I think, give us a few days just to concretize the Spain that they're going to go ahead with it. We should know in a few days. And then we can start lobbying governments to get behind it. As far as the content, we don't prescribe the content at all. We've given a note there, which can be put alongside yours. Yours can be included with ours. We'll have to see how we do that. But the governments at the end of the day have the right to formulate it, and they can change anything they like.
Great, thank you.
They're the final tablers of the agenda.
Great, thanks. And Vic, also just a request that you would share with us that European Commission study I think you mentioned in your previous remark, and also any introduction to this new capital group that you were referring to.
Okay, the coalitions group. What I do is send the link to them. We
yeah.
Of it. I was an advisor on the previous board, but I'm not on the new board as of yet, but I'll send the link.
Thank you. So I would just like to, in wrapping up, to thank Sue for her leadership of the conversation, and particularly Vic, to thank you for spending this time with us. I think you defined, you said leadership, energy, and a thick skin. Which I think many people would say is the definition of a social entrepreneur. But it sounds to us, I mean, just hearing you speak, you're not the usual UN person. You sound like someone who is a social entrepreneur at heart, and it's great to know that you're on the inside of this process and providing this great leadership, hopefully with energy and a thick skin that you need to succeed as you go forward. And just thank you for this time, and know that we are committed to working with you and to supporting you and helping this task force achieve what it can achieve in terms of getting those social innovations and social entrepreneurial changes much more embedded in the system that's out there. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and onwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.